let's talk about the pick axes. And what I mean by axes is the plural word of axis. Okay, there are actually three axes that we need to think about. We've got our X, our Y, and our Z. Now, I don't know if you remember that or if you've covered that yet in your geometry. I'll simplify it for you. Essentially, we have the axis here where we're going to move up and down the strings at times. That's one that we don't use too much on guitar. Banjo, we do. Then we also have our up and down, of course, and that's the main one that people think about whenever they begin playing guitar, and that's a lot of times the only axis that people operate in, and that's one of the telltale signs of a beginner whenever they're just only remaining in that one axis. But then we have this Z-axis, this out and in. Now, of course, we're not going to be actually doing that motion with our hand, but there is some tiny movement that needs to happen in that Z-axis because we need to be able to switch from string to string. Let me show you what I mean. So if we're playing this string with a downstroke, and then we need to play the string below it or above it, however you want to think about it, with an upstroke. So if we need to do this, and then this, and then this. Okay. The problem there is if we only remain in this vertical axis, we're going to come back in contact with that original string in order to pass through to the next. And that's one of the frustrations of beginner flat pickers is their lack of cleanliness whenever they're trying to cross pick and play various strings, because they haven't considered that there needs to be some movement in the Z-axis coming out away from the guitar so that we may miss the string as we come back through. We have more of this. As I mentioned before, beginner guitar players are going to live in this vertical axis, or the Y-axis if you want to think about it like that. And that's why you see people, when they play beginner, they're usually locked at the wrist and they're using their elbow. And they're just playing down and up through the strings without any kind of accuracy or nimbleness or being able to select various strings to play at will. So how do we achieve both playing this Y-axis, the up and down, like we need to, while also being able to play that X-axis and miss the strings that we need to miss as we're cross-picking and flat-picking? And that is achieved by rotation this way, okay? So we're going to have a combination of our wrists moving up and down in the Y-axis, and then we're going to have a combination of it going out a little bit in the Z, and the way that we achieve that is through rotation. Okay, so our rhythm and our flat picking is going to be varying degrees of rotation. There's a great illustration to think about in order to be able to apply this to guitar. So it's kind of silly, but bear with me. Let's say you're walking along and you've got some dollar bills that you're counting, and it's been raining lately and there's puddles on the ground, and you drop one of your dollar bills, and to your horror, it flies right into a water puddle, right? So you reach down and you grab this dollar bill and you grab it by the corner, right? Because you're wanting to get the water off. And what do? You shake it. You might hold it out and, oh, gross. And you try to grab that dollar bill at the corner. You're probably grabbing it just like you did that card, and you give it that shake. Okay, that movement there, that you're able to do the shake, that is a key to the movement that we're going to need on our guitar whenever we're playing, especially rhythm, okay? So our rhythm is not achieved by going up and down. Our rhythm is achieved by shaking off the dollar bill, so that when we go through our strings, there's this twisting movement. There's a little bend in the wrist, just a little bit. We're not like this. Okay, that's one thing. One difference that might be whenever you're shaking off a dollar bill versus when you're playing guitar, there is a slight bend in the wrist, but not tons, okay? We still got our original pick grip that we talked about. So one thing we can practice is just lightly holding our pick and shaking off that dollar bill through our string, okay? Much, much more efficient. You're able to be more powerful. You're able to exert less force to get through the strings. There's less actual movement happening than this. Much easier. Go through the guitar strings like that, okay? Now, believe it or not, whenever we go into flat picking, it's just a micro version of shaking off the dollar bill, okay? We've got to bring that Z-axis in a little bit, and that rotation helps that. Now, this is going to feel weird at first if you've never done it, but I would invite you to stray outside of the Y-axis alone, okay, if that's where you're stuck, and begin to introduce some rotation. Most of our movement of our picks through our strings does not happen from our elbow, okay? So our elbow ends up being somewhat stationary. It's going to have a little bit of movement, and this varies from player to player. Most of our movement is going to come from our wrist, but also even beyond that, can even come from our finger joints. If you go and watch some videos of the master, Tony Rice, he does a lot of this. And one thing that I like to do is sometimes practice playing fiddle tunes. This is just something personal. I like to practice playing fiddle tunes using only my thumb joint as much as I can. And I'm not very good at it. But the reason why I do that is to activate that thumb joint so that whenever I go back into regular playing, my body knows that I can employ that thumb joint to help me get those micro movements. So that's just a kind of on the side tip there that you might consider. Okay, so we're shaking off the dollar. And one thing that I would recommend if you're just getting started, or if that's uncomfortable, is just to sit around for 2 or 3 minutes and practice shaking off the dollar through your guitar strings to the point where you're able to hold onto your pick. Because at first your pick's going to fly out and it's going to shift all around and you're going to get frustrated. But if you do it enough, you'll learn how to hold on to that pick just tight enough to keep it from moving, but be able to play through those strings with hardly any effort at all. That's the great thing, y'all. Whenever you're playing fast rhythm and ultimately fast flat picking, it should not be hard. You're not forcing it. You're just not. We're able to use our physiology to do the work. Okay, so just like whenever you grab a dollar bill, nobody grabs a dollar bill when they go to shake it off. They go, "Ugh," and they do it with their whole arm or their whole body. And nobody even does it with their elbow. Nobody shakes up. They take it and they do this because that's the way that you can most quickly and effortlessly apply the needed pressure and speed to get that water off the dollar bill. And the same thing applies to our guitar. Okay, let's discuss our hand position now, the age-old debate of open versus closed. Here we go.